The 6th of April, 1941. German bombers appear over Belgrade, and air raids spread across the country. Within days, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia collapses, and the Nazis impose military rule over Serbia, one of the most important parts of the occupied kingdom. In the months that follow, guerrilla attacks against German forces increase, and Serbia soon becomes a war zone. In response, the occupation authorities introduce in September 1941 a fixed reprisal order. For every German soldier killed, 100 civilian hostages are executed, and for every soldier wounded, 50 more are shot. Nevertheless, by the autumn of 1941, resistance spreads through central Serbia. During a clash in mid-October, 10 German soldiers are killed and 26 are wounded. German commanders calculate the number of civilians to be killed and launch reprisals in nearby villages, shooting men and burning homes. The reprisals then extend into the city of Kragujevac, where males between 16 and 60 are rounded up, marched to fields outside the city, and executed with heavy machine guns. By the time the killing ends, nearly 2,800 men and boys lie dead in mass graves. This atrocity, committed by the Nazis against the local civilian population, becomes known as the Kragujevac massacre. However, this crime will not remain unpunished, and the perpetrators will pay with their own lives. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. By early 1941, Adolf Hitler was preparing for the planned invasion of the Soviet Union. Before launching the campaign in the east, the German leadership sought to secure its southern flank in the Balkans. Political instability in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and the presence of British forces in Greece made the region a strategic concern for Berlin. On the 6th of April, 1941, German aircraft bombed Belgrade, the Yugoslav capital, in a massive air raid that killed many civilians and destroyed large parts of the city. Within days, German, Italian, Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops advanced from all sides. The Yugoslav army, poorly prepared and ethnically divided, could not resist the large-scale and coordinated assault, and after only 11 days of fighting, on the 17th of April 1941, the government signed an unconditional capitulation. The state of Yugoslavia ceased to exist, and its territory was divided among the Axis powers and their local allies. As resistance to the German occupation began to grow across the region, Berlin introduced increasingly brutal measures to suppress it. On the 16th of September 1941, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the High Command of Nazi Germany's armed forces, issued Hitler's order regarding the ratio of hostages to be shot, requiring the execution of 100 hostages for every German soldier killed and 50 for every soldier wounded. 3 days later, on the 19th of September, Adolf Hitler appointed the Austrian General of the Infantry, Franz Böhmer, as the chief commander in Serbia, giving him direct authority to suppress the attacks against the German forces in the occupied territory. He arrived with a staff of the 18th Mountain Corps and took control of German occupation forces already stationed there. Among the main formations operating under his authority were the 704th, the 714th, and the 717th Infantry Divisions, units tasked with carrying out security operations and brutal reprisals across German-occupied Serbia. Böhmer openly encouraged vengeance against the Serbian population and reminded his soldiers of the defeats Austria-Hungary had suffered during the First World War. Addressing his troops, many of whom were Austrian-born, he declared, "Your objective is to be achieved in a land where, in 1914, Streams of German blood flowed because of the treachery of the Serbs, men and women. You are the avengers of those dead. The consequences of those orders soon became visible in the town of Gornji Milanovac in central Serbia. By late September 1941, the town had effectively been cut off from the rest of German-occupied Serbia, as guerrilla fighters repeatedly disrupted road and rail transport in the surrounding area. Two different resistance movements operated in the region. One was the Chetniks, a Serbian nationalist guerrilla force loyal to the Yugoslav government in exile and the Serbian monarchy. The other was the Partisans, a communist-led resistance movement organized under Josip Broz Tito that sought to wage a broader revolutionary war against the Axis occupation. On the 29th of September 1941, fighters from Chetnik and partisan resistance groups attacked the German garrison in Gornji Milanovac. The town was defended by the German troops stationed in a local school building. The insurgents did not expect to capture the garrison. Instead, the attack was intended to demonstrate resistance and attract new recruits from the surrounding villages. The assault began in the morning. The guerrillas quickly overran the German sentry posts, but heavy machine gun fire from inside the school halted their advance. After 90 minutes of fighting, 10 German soldiers had been killed and 26 had been wounded. Under German occupation policy, these casualties carried devastating consequences for the civilian population. The standing orders issued by German commanders demanded the execution of 100 Serbian civilians for every German soldier killed, and 50 for every soldier wounded. The fighting in Gornji Milanovac therefore triggered a massive reprisal operation. German authorities began searching for hostages in the area around the nearby industrial city of Kragujevac, which soon became the focal point of the retaliation. Located about 100 kilometers or 62 miles south of Belgrade, Kragujevac had a population of more than 40,000 in 1941 and served as the headquarters of a German military district. In October 1941, German commanders decided that this city and its surrounding communities would supply the hostages needed to fulfill the brutal reprisal quota. The first arrests began on the evening of the 18th of October 1941. German authorities ordered the detention of all male Jews in Kragujevac, together with individuals suspected of communist activity. In total, only 70 men were taken into custody, but because this number was far too small to satisfy the reprisal quota demanded by German command, the following day, German troops turned to nearby villages. Soldiers from German occupation units entered the villages of Mečkovac, Maršić, Grošnica, and Milatovac. Men were rounded up and executed on the spot. In these 4 villages alone, 422 civilians were shot, even though no German soldiers had been killed there. Despite these killings, the Germans still had not reached the number of hostages they required. German commanders therefore ordered large-scale arrests inside Kragujevac itself. Soldiers moved through the city arresting men and boys between the ages of 16 and 60. People were seized in fields, factories, markets, on the streets, and in their homes. Some 300 school children and teachers were arrested in their classrooms. Roma children, mostly shoe shiners who had refused to polish German soldiers' boots, were rounded up as well. The detainees were taken to army barracks on the outskirts of the city, where each hostage was registered and his belongings recorded. By the evening, several thousand men and boys had been rounded up and placed under armed guard, waiting through the night for the decision that would determine their fate. Members of the Serbian fascist movement, Zbor, were allowed to inspect the prisoners, after which a large number of detainees were removed from the execution lists. more than 3,000 individuals identified as supporters of the movement and described as reliable patriots or genuine nationalists were released and excluded from the execution lists. Those who remained were labeled by the Nazis as communists, and for the German authorities, such accusations were enough to justify their execution. The remaining prisoners spent the night under heavy guard, uncertain whether they would survive the coming day. On the morning of the 21st of October 1941, the prisoners were marched from the city toward open fields on the outskirts of Kragujevac. Groups of between 50 and 120 men and boys were lined up before German firing squads from the 717th Infantry Division. Heavy machine guns were positioned in front of the prisoners, and the executions began. The shootings continued for about 7 hours. Witnesses later recalled scenes of extraordinary courage among the condemned. One elderly teacher reportedly addressed the soldiers before the shooting began, declaring, "Go ahead and shoot. I am conducting my class." He was executed together with his students. As they faced the firing squads, many prisoners sang the patriotic song, "Hey, Slavs." It is estimated that between 2,778 and 2,794 people were murdered during the massacre in Kragujevac. Of the total killed, 144 were high school students, and 15 of the victims were 12 years old. Victims of the mass executions included Serbs, Jews, Romani people, Muslims, Macedonians, Slovenes, and members of other nationalities. Roughly 200 of the remaining prisoners were forced to bury the dead, an act that took days. The rest were sent home, and following the massacre, the Wehrmacht, the German armed forces, held a military parade through the city center. After the war ended, in May 1945, those responsible for the Kragujevac massacre eventually faced justice. The soldiers of the 717th Infantry Division, who were directly responsible for the massacre, continued anti-partisan operations across the Balkans for the remainder of the war. In 1943, the division was reorganized as the 117th Jaeger Division, and hundreds of those that were once deployed in Serbia were killed during the Second World War. The Serbian Volunteer Corps, the paramilitary branch of the fascist political organization Zbor, which collaborated with the Nazis and were involved in the Kragujevac massacre, retreated into Austria towards the end of the war. There, they surrendered to British forces, but after the war, most were returned to Yugoslavia, where they were executed on charges of treason. Franz Böhmer, the commanding general in Serbia, with direct responsibility for crushing the resistance, was captured in Norway. He was then brought before the hostages trial, a division of the subsequent Nuremberg trials, and charged with war crimes committed in Serbia. When his extradition to Yugoslavia seemed imminent, Böhmer committed suicide. Wilhelm Keitel, who issued Hitler's order regarding the ratio of hostages to be shot, was indicted by the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg as one of the major war criminals. He was found guilty on all counts and executed by American Army Sergeant John C. Woods, who is believed to have been deliberately bad at his job, causing the 10 Nazi war criminals from the Nuremberg trials whom he executed on the 16th of October 1946 to suffer as they died long, agonizing deaths. With Wilhelm Keitel, however, it was even worse. The 64-year-old Keitel was hanged, but because the trapdoor was too small, it caused him painful head injuries, and as he fell from the gallows with insufficient force to snap his neck, his horrible convulsing and trembling lasted 28 long minutes before he died. The Kragujevac massacre remains one of the most brutal examples of Nazi reprisal policy during the Second World War. It stands as a reminder of how radical ideology and power, and blind obedience to orders, can lead to unimaginable crimes. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.